Hey, what's up, Masters? Welcome to another episode of Path to Mastery podcast. Today we are with Stephanie Gutierrez. I think I said it close. How am I close?
Stephanie G. That's fine.
All right, good. Stephanie
Yep.
G. Hey, thank you. Thank you for joining us today. We're having a conversation today on ADUs, accessory dwelling units. I'm struggling to say that as well. And something kind of newer to our area, although it's been around for a couple years, but just in the last 3 or 4 months, they really have started talking more about it, and it's been approved in almost every county in Massachusetts. But you guys are on the West Coast. You've been dealing with this for years, and I reached out to a community, Stephanie, and I said, hey, we want to learn about ADUs. We need to know how these things work. What are the things that we need to know? And your name just kept coming up over and over and over and over again. And everybody said, you got to talk to Stephanie. So Stephanie,
That's
thank
so
you
awesome.
for joining us today.
Thank you. No, when you reached out to me, I was like, wow, I'm so glad that people are really putting my name out there as the ADU expert, especially on Clubhouse, because that's really where it began for me, kind of niching down into ADUs, because as you mentioned, here in the West Coast, it's the only way to cash flow, create passive income. And we'll talk about the different options that, it provides for investors or first-time buyers in the market. But yeah, it's a hot topic, and it's going to be a hot topic nationwide, especially with it now, being allowed in your area. You're going to see that a lot more often in different states.
Yeah. First off, how long have you been doing ADUs, and how long have they been being done on the West Coast? I mean, I heard about it. When I heard about it a couple years ago, it didn't really make sense. Like, am I really going to turn my shed into a house or my garage into a house?
Right.
So
Yeah.
how?
So
Yeah.
a little backstory. I mean, I've been in the real estate business for over 15 years, from building real estate teams to having my own real estate team. And then I, started niching into ADUs, I'd say 2017, because in 2016 is when legislation passed one of their first legislations on ADUs. But then 2017 is when it kind of took off. And then 2020, they did more updated legislation. Last year, now they're even allowing for ADUs to be sold separately if the local city opts into it. So we've come a long way from 2016, which is when I started tapping into ADUs, and that's when I started consulting for them as well.
Okay, great. Good to know. And you mentioned now they're even maybe, that's certainly not happening here yet, but setting them up so you could sell it as a separate property.
Correct. So AB 1033 is a legislation that passed this year, and that allows you to condoize your ADU. So they are doing it in places like Seattle, right? For those of you who kind of follow the real estate gurus, everybody knows Thatch Nguyen. He's big in Seattle, and he's basically implementing this strategy at scale and building multiple ADUs and selling them off as condos. I know that out in Portland, it's very popular as well, but yeah, it's a new thing. I think in California, San Jose, which is up in like the Bay Area, is one of the few cities that has opted into AB 1033.
So let me back up first, because sometimes I do that. I get excited and I jump ahead. So first off, tell our people what is an ADU?
Yeah, so an ADU is its own standalone or attached unit to a main lot, right? And this property or this unit needs to operate very independent as its own property, right? So it has its own bathroom, kitchen, living space. And here in California, you can build up to 1,200 square feet. So when people think ADUs, they think it's something very small, but a 1,200 square foot house is a pretty decent 3-bedroom, 2-bath here in Southern California. So you're able to build another house in your backyard, in the front yard, on the side. It really just depends case by case on where it fits in your specific lot.
So in Massachusetts, we're up to 900 square feet right
I
now.
was reading about that. Yeah. So you guys do have some restrictions on
height as well.
The height, the minimum minimum size and max size. For us, we don't have a minimum lot size requirement. We don't have a minimum lot size ADU. So, I mean, I've seen ADUs as small as 200 square feet and then as big as 1,200. And in some cases, maybe even a little bit bigger than that.
So let's go to the second point then. Why would somebody want to do an ADU?
So there's different reasons why people would want to build them, and which is why I started niching down into it. Was I was working with a lot of buyers, right? A lot of them are investors, a lot of them are first-time home buyers, a lot of them are seasoned investors, and every single one of them was asking questions about ADUs, and I didn't really know what the process even looked like, right? Like, where do you get started? How do you find out what's allowed, what's not allowed? But then most importantly, I started asking questions like, why do you want to build it? Well, a first time home buyer, if in order for you to tap into the LA market, you know, your average price point is 800,000. Your average monthly payment is like 6,500. People, your average Joe who wants to buy a 3-bedroom, 2-bath in LA is looking at how they can offset their mortgage. So people were asking me as I was showing property was, hey, Steph, how can we convert the garage so we can rent it out for 2,500 and hopefully help us offset our mortgage, right? And offset other expenses. So that's one reason why people are building it, for passive income or create some sort of cash flow to help them offset other expenses. For investors who are, more long-term hold investors, this isn't a strategy for the short-term flippers, right? Because it takes time to build these. But for long-term investors, it really helps them just add more doors. You're adding more doors. One thing I haven't touched on is in the multifamily space, you're really able to add multiple ADUs on a lot, and places like San Diego, where you have the bonus ADU program, you can build 10, 15, 20 ADUs on a single family lot, right? So if you think about it, like a corner lot near a transit area, I mean, some of these developers are buying these properties, tearing them down and building a whole bunch of ADUs onto them. So there's different reasons why people are building them, but I would say the top two is create passive income and cash flow. And then the second one that I see a lot is the baby boomers, right? A lot of baby boomers are considering, not them, but like their family members are having to make tough decisions between, should I pay $8,000 a month to have my parents in assisted living, or should I convert the garage instead, in their back house, have them rent out the main house, and then they can live in the ADU in the back. So what I say is ADUs allow for a lot of flexibility. It really allows you to think of it as a rental right now, but it could be your retirement home later in the future, or it could help, a family member. So those are like the main two reasons. But of course, on the higher end, I've seen people get creative with it and build indoor pickleball courts, wellness centers, people working from home. So there's different reasons why people are doing it.
Well, it's funny because I hadn't even thought about the baby boomer element of it yet. And I think that's great. What about value? I mean, does it also increases property value, right?
Yeah, so you and I were talking about that last time we were chatting on the phone, and you're seeing different ARVs in different areas because there's different types of ADUs, there's different build outs, there's different structural types, and then there's different areas. So when you're comping out an ADU, we are seeing all kinds of different, valuations. I'd say on the low end, 20 to 30%. And on the high end, you could see 100% returns. But, you got to take into consideration what type of ADU, how was it built, what types of finishes, and then what area, what is it in? Some ADUs in Laguna Hills are definitely going to see a huge ROI versus, some in like Long Beach or some of these more affordable beach cities. And I'm mentioning those cities because that's mainly where I do business. So that's what I'm seeing.
I love it. Also, the other element of it is new construction now. I know in California, it's almost becoming standard. And I think builders out here now are starting to look at that as well, closer to the Boston area.
100%. Yeah. If you look at on the MLS here for us, a lot of the new construction already comes with that ADU as well. So, developers are really looking at how they can maximize their development standards by, just implementing more ADUs, because the time frame is also cut in half if you know what you're doing and if you're working with cities who have a streamlined process.
What would you say are some of the challenges when it comes to ADUs?
Yeah, I'd say two challenges is one, financing, at least in the residential world. In multifamily, it's very simple, right? If you're adding more doors, more income, you're basically however much the asset is producing is how they're going to calculate it and how you can get funding for it, or you can leverage capital. But in the residential world, I mean, people are either doing a HELOC loan or a HELOC renovation loan, and a HELOC loan is a home equity line of credit. So people who have equity, are leveraging that equity by paying for the ADU that way. I mean, I was talking to someone yesterday who I had on my podcast. She's going to share her story on how she was able to do it with 0% interest credit cards for the first 12 months, and then a HELOC to pay for the construction. So I think it's difficult for people to find financing if they don't have equity. So like a first-time home buyer who wants to buy a property with the intention of building, we don't have a whole lot of options for them yet. And that's one challenge that I see in the market. The second one is it's getting better, but I would say, and this is probably a challenge that you guys may face, in Massachusetts, now that the state is all for it and they're pro housing and they're pro ADUs, now it's going to take for the cities to kind of catch up with that process.
Yeah.
And how easy are they going to make it for you to actually build? So we kind of went through that hurdle. I think now it's a lot better because legislation is really fighting for that. So now there's a rule where it's called a 60-day rule, which means from the moment you submit plans to the city, they have to respond with an approval or a denial or corrections on the plans that you're submitting within a 60-day period. Because what was happening was, it was just taking ridiculous amount of time to get these plans approved. And so working with the certain cities that were giving a lot of pushback. And we still see that, right? In some coastal areas, some people are not all for ADUs. And that's another topic. There's people bring up the parking situation, especially in high dense areas. People in the coastal commission is giving pushback on some of these ADU build outs as far as how they can be built, right? They have to very much look like the main property. So I'd say financing and working with the city are two of the biggest challenges.
Yeah, because that's interesting because that's ultimately why I reached out to you, was because we had some questions. I have somebody that's building a house right now with an ADU, and we were trying to figure out how we would, like, what kind of value would we add? And we reached out to appraisals, local appraisals. They had no idea. They're like, we don't even, like, we know what they are, but we don't know how to value them. And that's what really prompted our conversation, which led to this conversation. So that's exciting. And same thing, right? What you talked about right now, like Worcester has their own bylaws for ADUs. Auburn, the next town over, has different bylaws, right? And then Northborough, the next town. So you really got to start to know like each town, and because it's not like uniform across the state. Is it like that in California as well?
It's a little bit different. I think it's gotten better. When the statewide ordinance happened in 2016, 2017, it's statewide. So state law overrides whatever your local municipality or local county is stating, right? So there has to be a lot of reinforcement on that. And that's one thing that I like about California. I don't see that in other states like Florida or even Massachusetts or Oregon. It's not a statewide ordinance that's in place that you have to follow. So in California, it's different. In California, the state law says any homeowner really can build up to 1,200 square foot ADU. In some cases, they can build two ADUs. They could do a junior ADU and an ADU. So you can turn your single family home from a SFR to a triplex. And then the setbacks are pretty standard all across the board, 4-foot setbacks. The heights were actually increased from 18 feet to from 16 feet to 18 feet, and in some cases 24 feet if it's attached to the property. So it's understanding how to leverage all these new legislations. We have a nonprofit organization here. It's called Casita Coalition, and they've been fighting a lot to have these standard building requirements all across the state so that there is no discrepancy, because like in our town, same thing. Long Beach has their local ADU ordinance and they're all for it. And then Torrance may have, which is the town next to it, may have their own restrictions, right? Or they may cap it. And that we are able to see. Some areas will say, hey, you can only build up to 800 square feet or 1,000, right? And so you do have to kind of read between the lines with each city. But what they can do is say you can't build. So you are able to build, but you do have to follow their rules, just like you would in an HOA, right? An HOA can't say you can't build an ADU because that means they're not following state law, but they will have their requirements on how you're going to build it and what it's supposed to look like according to their HOA rules and regs, right?
Super good information. I can't wait to send this out to all of our database, you know. Well, by the way, we get about 30 people on Clubhouse, and we got about another 30 people online on a different channel. So that's cool. Just listening live. If anybody has any questions, you can drop your question in the chat. I know somebody said, God bless you, brother. Thank you. God bless you as well in the chat. Anybody has any questions? If you do, feel free to raise your hand on Clubhouse, and we're happy to, we got probably about another 10 minutes or so with Stephanie. So if you have any questions, let us know, and we will bring you into the conversation. Stephanie, what would you say are some of the, like, if somebody's interested, first steps, like what would be the steps? Yeah, the steps.
Yeah, I mean, the first step is like calling the city and figuring out for yourself, what does that specific city ordinance look like? What are the requirements for it? And then the second thing is building a team. You know, I talk about this a lot because I have a course for realtors on how to become an ADU realtor. And what that basically means is you consult the client throughout the entire process. So the same way that we as realtors have our team, right? We have our title, our escrow, our transaction coordinator, our home inspector, our appraiser. Those are all part of our team, right? When we're helping you buy or sell. When you're building out your ADU team, you're going to need a good architect who's going to help you with the architectural plans. You're going to need a good contractor, or probably a design and build firm, which means they have the architect and contractor working side by side. And that's very important. It's just as important as the realtor and the lender being on the same page, right? So you need an architect, a contractor, a lender. How are you going to fund the project? And that's really your second step. First is figuring out, what can you build? Call your city, read the local ordinance, follow those rules and regulations, find out people who are already building and have successfully built a couple. In your case, right, David, it's a new theme. So you guys are going to have to kind of have this learning curve of whoever does it first and has success with it and understands the state law and how to use it effectively, then that's who you want to go with first. The second step is figuring out financing, because I get clients who say, oh yeah, I want to build a 2-bedroom, 2-bath in my backyard, and I want an 800 square foot ADU, but you can only afford, you know, a 400 square foot ADU, which is typical. Like most garage conversions in California, or at least in SoCal, are 400 to 600 square feet. That's what people are typically able to afford, because that's about 150 to 200,000. So I always tell my clients, we got to figure out, what can we build, and then what can you afford? And then based on that budget is what we're going to build. Just like when you're buying a property, right? What are you pre-qualified for? And then let's kind of reverse engineer from there. What can you afford? What's the budget? And then we build based off that.
So again, I'm making some notes. So the team is, you said architect,
contractor
is a builder, right? Same thing.
Right.
A builder,
yes,
contractor. Okay. And those could be the same or separate, right?
Those could be the same or separate, okay. Right.
So you architect, builder, contractor, lender, finance, right? Money. We need money.
Lender.
Oh, well, that's the lender. Yeah.
That's the lender.
Finance. Got it. Anything else?
That's pretty much it. That's your team right there. And yeah, it's very important to vet out the team, just like it is when you're buying your investment property, right? Like,
or selling real estate.
Yeah,
your team will kill you. Either your
100%.
attorneys, An attorney, should that be a big part of this as well? Having the right
I would
attorney?
assume that in your
Yeah,
guys' state, probably. I
because
mean, we
we're an
yeah.
attorney state. Yep.
And
Okay.
you are gonna need a title, but I think you guys that's together, right?
Yep.
Title and the
Yeah, the
attorney. Yeah.
attorneys handle, because we're an attorney state, so they handle all that stuff.
Yeah. So in your case, you guys would need an attorney. We can just have a title rep. So having someone to title, and then the third piece to it is if you're gonna rent this out, what we're noticing now is people kind of in Cali, everybody knows about ADUs. A lot of people are building them. We have enough data, and people are successfully doing it. But what people are struggling with is, and they didn't put too much thought into at first, was they got it built in order to rent it out. And now they're like, oh my God, I'm a landlord. I don't know how to do tenant screening. I don't know how to manage a property. So understand that while you're building this, you are creating another role for yourself. So it may be worth considering a property management company or someone to help you, transition from being a homeowner to an actual landlord and treat it as a business. So that's kind of
Interesting.
what I offer is full service. I help my clients with the acquisitions, with the build out and the management.
And how about like city planner, assessor, maybe engineer, as being like would consider them almost part of my team, right?
100%. Yeah. I mean, obviously, when you're working with the same cities and you're successfully speaking to people in the planning department, you have to build relationships with them. And there's some who do a very good job at staying on top of whatever the ADU ordinance is. And then there's a few others who just treat it as a job and they're having a hard time understanding it themselves, which is why there's a lot of friction when you're talking to the city. Because sometimes the city will say, hey, you can't build it, or you need fire sprinklers. But if you understand the code, you can reference the code and say, hey, I don't need fire sprinklers. It says it here, section 658, whatever, because you understand the code better than they do. So believe it or not, that's been like the biggest hurdle still.
Yeah.
Is trying to fight with the city, but in a nice way to where you could still get your point across, educate them a little bit, and then make sure you get it to the finish line. And then once they see you working there, several times, you ultimately build a relationship. They trust your judgment, and you're able to work through that.
So let me ask you this. I know you're a real estate agent. How much of your business is in ADUs versus how much of your business is like traditional real estate?
Most of it is traditional real estate. Now I'm starting to get a lot more consulting on the ADU stuff. But for the last, 3-4 years, it was really just niching down into ADUs. And a lot of investors were reaching out to me just because I knew the strategy, not so much because they were building, but more so because they're like, oh, let me go work with her because I do want to buy a property with the intention of building in the future. So I'd rather buy with somebody who can check everything about the property before we buy it to see what we can build. So now I'm starting to see a little bit more on the consulting side. And ultimately, like, that's what I want to do, just consult.
I love it. Do you think someone should specialize at become a specialist at ADUs, right? As a real estate agent?
Yeah. When you reached out to me, I was like, damn, that's really smart that David's already picking up on it, because I think every realtor should really think about it. If it's popular in your area, which it probably will, if you're in any high dense area, it's going to become a thing. You should start looking into it, and you should become like that ADU expert realtor in your neighborhood, because it's like becoming a probate realtor. Someone who has a specialty will always, the business comes to you, you attract it because there's a need for it. And so I do think that there should be a lot more ADU realtors. It's going to be the new standard. Like, teaching people how to buy and sell is the bare minimum now. Now you got to know your stuff, right? When it comes to development, like, are you going to be able to set up the full-on team for me and help me buy and build? Because that's really where you're going to be able to set yourself apart from other realtors and brokers.
Yeah. You're bringing me back to my days of short sales. All the other agents said I will never do short sales, and I embraced it. And I started working with Wells Fargo, and our business blew up. Like,
me too. I was actually an assistant for a realtor, Century 21 realtor in Torrance in 2011. And I was the one going to properties and taking pictures for the
Yeah.
BPOs and
Yep. Yep.
uploading them. So she was a short sale, listing expert, and I was her assistant at the time. So yeah, I mean,
This is
I think
better. This is
this is way better because it's
better, but
needed.
yeah. Well, that short
Yeah,
sales were needed too, but this is more on a positive side, I guess. But either way, we helped a lot of people. So
exactly. Yeah. No,
um
it's a great niche. I think it's one that's needed, especially in these next couple years.
so I appreciate you doing this for us and my listeners. I want to make sure that people, pay you back. You have a course. People can. I want to take your course myself. So how do we get access to your course?
Yeah, so you can go to stefsalesadu.com and I have all of my information on there from the course to the call. I also have an ADU Play community in the school platform, which is the new Hormozy
Oh, cool.
platform. So I have a community there. I would say just tap into the community. I do a whole bunch of ADU meetups. They're called ADU meetups. So if you go to adumeetups.com, you can also tap into that. But yeah, the course is specifically for realtors wanting to become an ADU expert. So I talk about, how do you have a buyer consultation with the ADU strategy? How do you have a listing consultation with the ADUs? Like those conversations about ADUs should be in every conversation you're having with your current active and future clients or even past clients. Like right now that, Massachusetts allows it. If I was you, David, I would reach out to all my past clients and give them valuable information. Like, hey, now let's look at how we can leverage your equity. Let's look at how we can build back there, help you, create some
Mm,
cash flow and rinse and repeat the process. And that goes way further out, than just a phone call and like, hey, I'm going to check up on you and
yeah.
touch base. So
So, the last 2 weeks in a row, we have actually dropped blogs on our website. And not only do we send it to all of the 1,600 active people on our database, but we post it on Google, our Google business page. We have SEO, we have the right meta tags. So we're going all in to capture on. And this interview right here will also be posted everywhere, shared with our audience, shared on Google and the other search platforms. So
yeah, and I'll make
that's what we're
sure that
doing.
once you're on my podcast, which by the way, my podcast is very ADU specific. It's a very niched
Yeah,
podcast. So I can't wait to have you on because I think
I
for
think it's
that
next week.
episode, yeah, I think for that
Yeah, I'm
episode, we
excited.
can really talk about ADUs in Massachusetts and what that's going to look like for
Oh,
you
man, you're gonna
guys.
make me do
So,
more homework. I love it.
yeah,
I love
yeah.
it. Good.
No, but same for me because I caught myself reading about it last night. I was like, oh, let me prepare for the episode, make sure
Yeah.
I know my stuff a little bit, with Massachusetts. So I'll have more time to prep. But I
Stephanie, why aren't
appreciate
you
you.
all in on this? I mean, you would just blow this up in your ear. You're so knowledgeable. How come it's not 80% of your business? See,
It
there's my
should, right?
coaching cat kicking in
Yeah,
here.
no,
Yeah.
it's getting there. Trust me. Here's the other thing. How long are these projects taking? It takes about a year to build an ADU.
Oh, does it? Wow.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
people think that, it's going to take you a couple months. Like I said, it's not a short-term strategy, it's long-term. So yeah, eventually it'll be 100% of my business because that's where I'm gearing
Yeah,
towards.
it
Yeah.
just brings me back to I hate to say it again, but the short sale, and then before that it was the REOs.
Right.
Well, they were kind of simultaneous, but
And
then
then it
with
was
the
the loan
REO, yeah,
modifications and
yeah.
then it right?
So,
Yeah.
but I think this is something that's probably not going to be just a cycle. I mean, it'll be more as people get aware of it and like tell me more. I want to learn more about that, and then it'll probably taper, right? But I think there's
Exactly.
such a big opportunity right now, and I'm excited. So thank
Yep.
you for doing this. Anything I didn't ask, like, did I miss? What did I miss?
No, nothing. This was awesome. This was very valuable. I think it was a great, basic 101 understanding of what ADUs are and what's happening in California, and then what could happen in Massachusetts too. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I'm excited too, and so I'm excited for next week. Thank you again. Best way for Stephanie is Steph sells adus.com. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
And you can follow me on Instagram and just shoot me a DM. I always respond there much quicker than a text or an email. So
All right, awesome. Well, appreciate your time, Steph, and yeah, look forward to our connecting again next week.
Thank you. Sounds good, David.